Welcome to All Right in Sin City, a podcast about writers and writing in the Windsor-Detroit region. Your podcasters today are
Irene Moore Davis, author, educator, and local historian.
Kim Conklin, Windsor-based writer and filmmaker.
and me, Sarah Jarvis, former bookseller, publishing rep, and literary festival chair.
Carol Rose GoldenEagle is a novelist, poet, playwright, visual artist, and musician. She is the author of the award-winning novel Bearskin Diary, published by Nightwood Editions in 2015, which won the Saskatchewan Book Award for its French translation in 2019. A sequel, The Narrows of Fear, will be published in October 2020 by Inanna Publications. Her novel Bone Black was released by Nightwood Editions in 2019. And her poetry collection, Hiraith, a finalist for the 2019 Rasmussen, and Charowski Indigenous Peoples Writing Award, was published by Inanna Publications in 2018. As a visual artist, her work has been exhibited in art galleries across Saskatchewan and northern Canada. As a musician, she has been featured on a critically acclaimed CD of women's drum songs. Before pursuing her art on a full-time basis, Carol Rose worked as a journalist for more than 30 years in television and radio at APTN, CTV, and CBC. She lives in Regina Beach. She'll be joining us virtually for the fully online 2020 edition of BookFest Windsor, Festival du Livre, Windsor, October 15th to 18th. Welcome, Carol Rose GoldenEagle.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here and see all of you. It's been too long.
So you had a long and outstanding career as a journalist before turning to your art on a full-time basis. To what extent has your past journalism influenced the style or the content of your writing?
How has it influenced? I think what it's helped me to do is continuity. Because a lot of times people will maybe jump from here to there to there. And as a journalist, you have to have a sort of natural flow of storytelling, all factual. And so I bring that into my writing of fiction. And I love writing fiction because as a journalist, I was forced to stick to the facts. As a fiction writer, my characters can do anything. They can fly, they can be invisible, they can, go into different worlds other than the one we live in, and I'm really having fun with it. When I have to say that people ask me about what is your process, and everyone's is different. So when I do writing workshops, I have to make that clear that if someone gives you advice, it's their perspective. And whatever you do as a writer is awesome, and that's your style, that's your process. So with me, once I start really getting into a novel or a manuscript of poetry, something happens. It's kind of like when I get the cleaning bug and I can't stop, right? It's like, okay, I want to clean the house today. And so I spend hours and hours and hours and get everything done. That's how I write. So when I'm writing a novel, I will sit down and I'll just start. And I will be totally consumed with what I'm doing because I've already put it together in my head because I have to go up and walk a lot. And while we're walking, I think about storyline, I think about character development, I think about nuances, I think about ways to put different scenes together. And then I come back and I sit down and I write and I write and I write. And I might get tired and then I'll have a nap. And then if it's 2 or 3 in the morning and I have an idea, I get up and I write and I write and I write until maybe 8 or 9 in the morning, like all night long. And then I'll sleep for, a little bit, walk the dog, get up and write and write and write. And so basically that's all I do for maybe 4 or 5 months, however long it takes to get the first draft up. And it's kind of funny in a way because my friends and neighbors, I live in Regina Beach, which is actually a small town just outside of the city, on a lake, which is great. And my neighbors, they often worry about me. It's like, are you okay? We haven't seen you in a very long time. Because eventually I have to go to the store and get some food, right? And it's like, no, I'm perfectly fine. I'm just writing. And anyway.
Do you work like that with all your disciplines? You are skilled in the variety of disciplines like visual art and the poetry and fiction and the drama and the music. Hi, Saffron, the dog. So do you spend, your 5 months on the writing and then maybe spend another week or month on work of art? Is that how you work?
Yeah, it's funny because I cannot do two things at once. So if I'm writing, I cannot paint. If I'm painting, and I'll get into the same sort of mode, I can't do music. Right now I'm supposed to be working on a children's CD of Indigenous drum songs because I do a lot of presentations in schools with my drum. And I really love it because so many of the schools I go to, stop it, Becky, that's enough. So many of the schools I go to, the children have never had any type of interaction with a First Nations person. And so I'm their first impression of our culture. And we have fun. And we have so much fun that I thought, you know what? I need to record these songs. So I'm going to be recording a bunch of children's drum songs. Like, here's one. You'll have to put your listening ears on. This is what I always tell the kids. I sing it in Cree, but it's a song everybody knows. I won't have my drum, but just imagine. Gogamina ki chichike kosatoi, keki mawe nikwa bakisan, pisum sakewa, ikwa mi okisaga. Gogamina ki chichike tongi kosatoi. And what is that? That is the Itsy spider when up the water spout. Anyway, yeah, so we have fun with that. And right now I'm supposed to be recording it. But COVID stopped everything again. I had it all set up to be in the studio in March. And I had some children in the community who were going to be doing some background for parts, some of the songs, because I just thought it would be lovely to have children's voices in there. But everything got canceled. So I don't know when it's going to come out, but hopefully before the end of the year we'll record that. And I really like the idea of sharing that. I really have to do those children's songs and children's stories because I also write children's stories that are oral. None of them are published, but they're beautiful. Like they're light and they're funny, and so much of my writing with fiction and my poetry is really dark because there are dark points in Canadian history that need to be talked about. So that's what I like to do with my art. Is thankfully I'm able to balance the two, light and dark, and somewhere in between. But somehow at the end of all of it, we rejoice in life, because I think that's the way we should end our day, every day, no matter how it went.
What a great philosophy. So from your first book to the work you're producing now, how do you feel like you've evolved as a writer?
I feel like I've gotten less worried about what everybody else will think. And I'm sure that's the same with every writer who's beginning at the start of their writing career. They worry about what other people will think. And I think what happened was I reread Stephen King on writing, his craft book for, writers giving some advice. And it really struck me that basically, and this is the shorter version of what he had written. He said, if you're writing, it's no place for polite conversation. So if you're worried about being polite, go somewhere else, And it gave me permission to be able to push beyond what I would normally be like in real life. As an example, Wakawiko Chikanik, which is The Narrows of Fear, my next, that's the pre-word, my next novel, which will be out in October. it's going to have a trigger warning at the beginning of the book. There are some really graphic, violent scenes in there. And given what I was writing about, the character would have done these horrible, horrible things. And people, sadly, there are people who do those types of things. So I didn't censor myself, and I think that's a blessing as a writer, to be able to say, you know what, I'm just going to go with it. And if I offend you, I didn't do it intentionally, because this is what the character does. And this is how it lends to the storyline. And it's not in there to be gratuitous. It's in there to say, this is reality. I mean, there are some violent people out there. There are some men who do terrible things to women because they don't think they'll be discovered. No one's going to know about this. If I beat my wife in my house, no one will know. Well, no, somebody's going to know. And even if a person doesn't know, God knows. And so I like to do that as well. Bring in a lot of spirit and really acknowledge our ancestors and, you know, the whole concept that we're not alone. We are constantly being guided and watched. And just don't ever think that you are above anything. I think that's a sort of a good lesson in life. We do what we do, and some of us are lucky enough to have been published, and I feel so grateful for that. But it doesn't make me anything other than I've been lucky enough to be published. You know? So anyway, I just like to do what I do.
So much of your writing focuses on Indigenous women's ways of healing themselves and others from trauma. Bearskin Diary and Here Rife address the impact of the 60s scoop on fictional characters and on yourself. Bone Black draws us into a world in which a young woman avenges her missing sister by hunting the men who prey on Indigenous women and girls. And your upcoming book, The Narrows of Fear, invites us into the lives of Indigenous women who are healing or being healed by other women. Do you feel that your writing has the capacity to advance the national conversation about issues that Indigenous people face? And what do you hope that Indigenous readers and readers from settler communities will take away from your body of work?
I really need to celebrate First Nations, Métis, and Inuit women, because we have not been. And that was the other thing about being a journalist. Every time we would produce stories in the newsroom about First Nations issues with anything, it was always negative. And our women were always portrayed as being homeless or victims or, you know, prostitutes or drug users in the media. And I think as a writer, I just got really tired of that because it's a stereotype. And so what I needed to do was create these characters. And it's not even creating, it's just taking the personalities and the traits of all these amazing Indigenous women I know right across Canada. And that was the really nice thing about being a journalist, was I traveled everywhere in the country. And same with being a writer. And so you meet all these beautiful, strong, resilient people who are building community. And those are the ones that I want to celebrate in my writing. And they overcome all sorts of things. And it was important for me to say that, because I'm tired of people looking at women with brown skin and saying, oh, well, you know, you're probably a secretary, or no, I'm actually a lawyer, or I'm a judge, or I'm a national television news anchor. You know, like, stop with the stereotypes. And then with Bone Black and Wen, you have to, and this is reality, there are so many cases of women, and we don't know what happened to them. And some of them, their bodies have been found, they have been murdered, and no one has come, you know, been arrested for it and been called to task. So what's the difference between those guys who are out there, they got away with it, why can't Ren get away with it too? And so, it's funny because I read some of the comments on Goodreads. I guess that would be the one website where I've seen some comments. And there are people who say things like, well, Ren is not above the law. And it's like, oh no, she's not. I never said she was. Yeah, it's funny. But the other thing is with writing and writers, there will always be criticism. And so I just want to tell every writer out there, do not take it to heart. I mean, if what you wrote resonates with you and is what you want to say and it's your truth, then say it. And if somebody doesn't like it, just be polite, but put on, the don't listen, don't change it, and don't apologize for what you've written, because if you obviously, as a writer, felt strongly enough to say whatever it is you said, and own it.
So you, as you said, you do celebrate your the heritage that you know so much about, and your books address some pretty serious, heavy, challenging issues. Yet you manage throughout your style and your voice to bring a certain lightness of touch to these difficult topics. As a writer, how easy or difficult has it been for you to find the right tone or the right words to explore these issues in your writing?
Once I start, it's not that difficult at all. And I don't know how to explain this, but once I really get into a project, I think about it, honestly, 24 hours a day. So when I'm sleeping, if I'm having problems writing and I come to a spot where I'm not sure how to express it, somehow it comes to me while I'm asleep. And so I will have information or dreams or whatever you want to call it, and inspiration while I'm sleeping. And then I wake up, like I said, automatically and carry on from there. So that part's not difficult. I think prayer has a lot to do with it, because I do. I mean, all the time, every day, I will pray. And mostly I pray to say thank you, because I have so much in my life. And for ideas, I pray for that too. And I totally believe that, those prayers are answered. And that's what happens with my writing. But I'm constantly also trying to get better at it. And hopefully I will look in 10 years back at my first novel and say, wow, that was really not very good. Well, it's funny because I've heard other writers do that too. It's like, okay, I started here and now I'm here on my 10th novel or whatever, and I look back and it's like, I don't even like that anymore. But yeah, it's at some point you have to let a project go, because somebody also asked, well, when do you stop editing? How do you stop rewriting it? How do you know when you're finished with a project? And you never are. Like I have reread Bearskin Diary, and it's published, and it's been on the market, and it's been its second, I think, going into its third printing. And I will read it and say, wow, I really should have changed the sentence structure there. So the editing process never stops. But as a writer, I would advise other writers, at some point you're done. At some point you're finished. Just know in your heart that, okay, I'm done now.
So, how has the natural environment or the landscape of Saskatchewan influenced your writing? How do you use that?
You have to realize how much I totally love my province. I mean, I have lived all over Canada in different regions, and I was living up in the Northwest Territories, which was beautiful, but it wasn't my home. I was up in Yellowknife anchoring with 60 News for about 10 years when my kids were small, and it was the perfect place to raise my children, because the program was based in Yellowknife. Yellowknife is only 20,000 people, and as a single parent, I was able to make sure, that I could get my kids to school and take part in all of their activities and still do my job at CBC, because it was a small city. If it was Toronto or even Windsor, where you have to, let's say my Jackson hurt himself and had to go to school to get him in the middle of the day, it might take me an hour to get there. In Yellowknife, it took 5 minutes to go get him. And so I appreciated that. But I had to come home, because I don't know if you've ever visited my province, but there's something, and it's been like this my entire life. There's something about the wind in Saskatchewan, and I swear it speaks to you. And if you're listening, and I've been talking to the wind since I was a little girl, and that is significant for me. The wind and how it makes the leaves move, and how it's, you've got to see our grain fields, doing this. You have the water right in front of you as well in winter. We don't have water in this province for the most part, except for up north. But we have this ocean of grain doing this. And I just have always really loved this affiliation with birds and frogs and crickets. And one of the things that really helped me with homesickness when I was not living in Saskatchewan was Connie Calder's song. And as an example, in Yellowknife, there were no trains up there. And where I live now in Regina Beach, there's every day I hear a train across the lake, right? And so I would listen to her songs, and it's like, ooh, it just keeps carrying on. Nothing more lonesome than a whistle when it's gone. Saddest thing you've ever come upon. Nothing more lonesome than a whistle when it's gone. And so I'd listen to those songs of hers, and they were all like the way I would write about the land in my fiction or my poetry. Her songs also resonated with me because she talked so much about her love of the land. And I don't know how to express it. I'm going to have to figure that one out. But the land inspires me a lot. And I will never leave Saskatchewan. I can't.
So it was such a joy to have you at Bookfest Windsor Festival du Livre in 2018. Your events at the Green Bean Cafe and the University of Windsor School of Creative Arts were memorable, to say the least. We're delighted that you're returning to Bookfest Windsor Festival du Livre this October, which will be a fully online experience this year. From your point of view, what have been the advantages and disadvantages of engaging with audiences virtually in this time of pandemic?
Yeah, I know everyone is doing it, and I know it's necessary. I would much rather see you in person, Irene, because then I can give you a hug, and I can say, and look into your eyes. And I really love interacting, on a one-to-one basis rather than virtually, but I understand why we need to do it. I think the conversations are much more intimate and personal when you're face-to-face. So we will do our best to get all through this, and hopefully I'll see all of you again in person at some point.
What's your next project? Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I was supposed to start another novel, and in fact I have some notes and I have, ideas, but I was really inspired not that long ago because it was Saint Jean Baptiste Day in Quebec, and my son Danny, he said, "Mom, what is that? What does that mean?" And so I was telling him about John the Baptist because I grew up in the Catholic Church, right? And so I realized, I don't really remember a lot of the story. And so rather than try and stumble through an explanation, I said, you know what? Netflix has a documentary series called The Bible. And so we started to find the segment about John the Baptist and what he did and why he did it. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to rewatch the whole series. So I did. And then I realized, oh my God, there's so many, similarities between the Bible and things that are still happening today with respect to Indigenous people. And I'll tell you, one of them is the story of Samson, right? And his strength came because he had that beautiful long hair, and he had this enormous strength until his hair was cut. Well, what does that remind you of? All of those nuns and priests went and took all of our children and rounded them up in residential school, and the first thing they did was cut off their braids, right? And so I'm doing that type of thing. I don't know how people are going to receive it, because they might say, "Oh my God, that's sacrilegious." But again, it's like, well, this is what I want to say. Even the crucifixion of Christ. People in this province and in Canada have no idea that in the 1800s, in Frog Lake, Saskatchewan, which is up by Prince Albert, or I think North Battleford, there was a public hanging. 5 Indigenous men were hanged because they were practicing their culture, you know. And so that's what I mean. There are so many similarities, and it's kind of sad because things have not changed in terms of how kind we are to each other as people. And we need to do that. And so it's kind of me saying, holy cow, as well as pointing out things in Canadian history that hardly anybody knows about, but we need to talk about it. So I'm working on that type of project right now, but it's going to be coming out as a poem. And I'm really excited about it. So.
Would you like to read a little bit of something now for us?
Yeah, sure. So, as you know, I was one of those children who was taken away in the 1960s. And I was just taken away from my mother the very day that I was born and put into the foster care system, and eventually adopted in southern Saskatchewan by a family who was non-Indigenous. It was a totally white community. So I grew up with racism everywhere in school, and this baffles me because I went to school with the same group of kids from grade 1 to grade 12, and you would think they would get tired of being bullied, but they never did. And so I faced racism every single day, and physical abuse too. Like, I remember a couple of the boys, they used to punch me and stuff. So, as a little girl, I was a fighter because I wasn't going to get beaten up. So I used to beat people up when I was like 7, 8, 9 years old. Thankfully, we didn't do it into our teens, but the name calling and all that remained. And in my home where I was adopted, I constantly heard all of these terrible things, which was normal for me. As an example, I remember this one time as an adult, I had gone back to visit, and the woman who I used to call my mom, we were sitting there, and there was a story on the radio, a news story, and it was a story about some bones had been found, and the police thought maybe it was Tamara Keekness, who was that 5-year-old who went missing one night in Regina. She went to bed, and then she just disappeared, and they never found her. And the woman who raised me, without a beat, she looked at me and she said, "Oh, she didn't go missing. Her mother probably sold her for a bottle of wine." She actually said that to me. And another thing she said, when we had visited and my children were, I don't know, they may have been 9 and 11 or something, and it was getting to be dusk, and it was a small prairie town. We were just visiting, and my kids were out, walking around, and she got very upset. She said, "Well, where are they?" And I said, "Well, they're just out. I mean, why would they just stay in the house?" It was a lovely summer day. And she said to me, "Well, what will the neighbors think? Nobody wants to see wild Indians walking around." And then I realized, you know what? She's been talking to me like that my entire life. And because of that, it was normal. It was normal for me to hear that type of stuff. And I was so actually blessed that I had met other people in my role as a journalist. I met other Indigenous people who were amazing, because I had been taught that Indians are stupid, lazy, a bunch of drunks, whatever. All of these stereotypes were constantly thrown at me as a child. And when I started finding my own culture, I realized, you know what? You all lied to me, because when I finally met my family too. I mean, you have to meet my sisters. They're awesome. I'm going to go up to northern Saskatchewan in a couple of days and stay for a week, mostly just to hear the Cree language, but also just to hang around with them. And they're all professionals, and they're all just so funny and you know, full of life and knowledge. My grandmother, as an example, who I never knew, she had all this plant knowledge, which was never passed on to me because I didn't grow up with her. But anyway, having done all that preamble, I grew up with a lot of negativity and racism, and that's just the way it was. But it never came from my dad. You know, my brother was calling me names and everything. All of it stopped when Dad came home from work because you weren't allowed to be mean to me, and you weren't allowed to call me Dad when my dad was home. Everybody knew that, right? And same with his mom, my grandma. She taught me a lot as well, taught me a lot about gardening, taught me a lot about making bread. And so his mom was also a really positive influence in my life. So he died, I guess it was about 10 years ago. He was 97, and he died doing what he loved to do, which was gardening. And it's like, thank you, God, for taking him while he was doing something that he loved to do. He was outside all the time. So anyway, I wrote a poem about him, and it's from it's my first collection of poetry, Harai. As I said, my second book of poetry will be coming out in the spring. So this poem is called Quapau, which is who calls and that's the name of a valley here in Saskatchewan. And it's about my dad. Racist uncle knocks at the screen door. It's made of old wood. Used to be part of a barn, torn down years ago after being damaged by wicked winds, seemingly ever present. Daddy answers. He says, "Hey, what's up? I just put on a pot. Want to come in?" The discussion with his older brother, it's amicable for a while. "Gas prices are up," he says. "Sure could use some rain already. Did you know that you can make soup from rhubarb?" And that small talk, it comes to an abrupt end as racist uncle foolishly ventures towards places forbidden and off limits. He says, "You're not still thinking about adopting that schlocky, are you?" And then my dad says, "Don't call her that." "No, I'm serious. You're only asking for trouble. I'm warning you, drop it." Racist uncle says, "Be reasonable. I know she's like a pet to you, but really, she is my daughter, you arse. She's an Indian. That doesn't matter." "What the hell? There is no need for you to take her in like this. For Christ's sake, even her own mother got rid of her." Dad says, "I'm warning you. Stop talking. Apologize for that. This is my daughter you're saying those things about." Racist uncle, "I'm not apologizing for anything. Shit, what's wrong with you? Sending a goddamn little Indian, for Christ's sake." I was eavesdropping, and this exchange lasted less than a minute, but damages me for a lifetime. "Okay, that's it. If you can't say anything nice, then get the hell out of my house and don't come back until you can apologize." Then there's a slam of fists atop a round Formica table, cold coffee splashing to mark the spot, to mark the day. Racist uncle wears a look of shock. He has been defeated and trumped by love. He slowly walks out the wooden door and never visits our house again. It's the first of many times I remember Daddy stepping in and sheltering me from the harm and the hatred. And I never got a chance to say thank you. Thank you for carrying me on your shoulders and lifting me out of those battles. It was a raging war where I never enlisted, but I found myself living. I also want to thank Creator for showing me that love is colorblind. And so was my daddy. Ever my hero, and never remaining silent in times of need. And I miss him. Rest in peace, winged warrior. I will tell good stories about you. And that's my poem from Dad. So, there we go.
Beautiful. Gorgeous.
That is legitimately one of my favorite poems of yours. It's from one of my favorite Canadian books. And if I were to make a movie of your life, I would cast Kevin Costner as your dad, just so you know. I totally would.
Cool. Yeah. I really found the need with Horizon to purge a lot of stuff because Bearskin Diary was fiction, although it was based on the reality of the 1960s truth and the reality of racism and when you first start writing, people will always tell you when you go to workshops, write what you know. And I've been in the media for more than 30 years, so I knew journalism and I know, the dynamics of working in a newsroom. And I also know being a single mom, what are the things that you have to go through to make sure that your children are safe and that you're taking care of them. And of the two, there's nothing negative that I can say about being a mom. And so, yeah, I put some storylines about journalism into Bearskin Diary, and it was funny because people often said, "Oh, is this an autobiography?" And I'm like, "No, it's not. It's what I know." And the characters are not real characters. It's funny, but so that was fiction. And then with her rights, so many of the poems are real. Some of them are poems that I just wanted to write, but the one about my dad, that's real. I really loved him.
And it shows. Thank you for joining us, Carol Rose GoldenEagle. Carol Rose GoldenEagle will be appearing at our fully online 2020 edition of BookFest Windsor Festival du Livre, October 15th to 18th. Please visit www.bookfestwindsor.com for more details. Thanks for joining us, Carol Rose.
Oh, my pleasure. And I look forward to seeing all of you, as I said, in person again at some point in time. See you later.
Amen to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Look for more episodes of All Right in Sin City wherever you listen to podcasts, or check out our website, allrightinsincity.com. For information and announcements of new podcasts, sign up to our email list or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.